Hello, I'm Eliza. My family called me a dreamer, a failure, a waste of potential. They laughed about my little business experiment over turkey and cranberry sauce, whispered about my financial struggles between sips of wine, and treated my ambitions like a punchline to a joke everyone was in on except me. I endured their mockery for 3 Thanksgivings in a row, until the moment my net worth flashed across the television screen during dinner, and suddenly no one was laughing anymore. But here's what they never saw coming. What would you have done if your own mother had called your life's work just an expensive hobby while your company was being valued at 8 figures on national television? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. It was exactly 4:45 p.m. on Thanksgiving Day when I pulled into my parents' driveway in the suburbs of Portland. The sky was already darkening, and the first few raindrops splattered against my windshield as I turned off the engine of my 7-year-old Honda Civic. I sat there for a moment, watching the warm glow of light from the bay windows, the silhouettes of my family members moving about inside, preparing for their annual tradition of making me feel inadequate. I glanced at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My shoulder-length brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. No makeup except a touch of lip balm. I wasn't dressed for a fancy dinner, just jeans, a simple gray sweater, and the jade pendant my grandmother had given me before she passed. "For luck in all ventures," she'd said. If only she could see me now, still driving the same car I'd had since college, still wearing the same coat, still being treated like the family disappointment. I gathered the homemade pumpkin pie from the passenger seat. Store-bought wood. Have given them another reason to criticize, and stepped out into the light drizzle. My older sister's Mercedes gleamed in the driveway next to my brother's Range Rover. Of course, they'd arrived early, probably already 2 glasses of wine in, warming up their repertoire of subtle digs and not-so-gentle teasing about my career choices. The doorbell chimed and my mother answered, martini in hand, perfect smile in place. "Eliza, finally. Everyone's been here for an hour." Her eyes drifted to the pie in my hands. "Oh, you didn't need to bring anything. Cassandra already made dessert, but we can put yours out too, I suppose." I handed her the pie and stepped inside, the warm air heavy with the scent of roasting turkey and sage. The house hadn't changed since I was a child. Same beige walls, same landscape paintings, same family photos where my siblings' achievements were prominently displayed, while mine were noticeably absent. In the living room, my father was deep in conversation with my brother-in-law about stock portfolios. My brother Tyler was showing off his new Italian watch to our cousin Derek. My sister Cassandra, immaculate in her designer dress, was arranging flowers at the dining table as if Martha Stewart might drop by for an inspection. "Hey, everyone," I said, unwinding my scarf. A few nods, a distracted wave from Tyler. No one got up. "Eliza, you remember Martin?" Cassandra gestured to a tall man on the couch I hadn't noticed before. He just made partner at Richardson and Bloom. "Dad's law firm," she added, as if I wouldn't remember the place my father had worked for 30 years, the firm where he'd always hoped I would follow in his footsteps. "Of course," I smiled politely. "Congratulations." Martin looked me over, that familiar assessment I'd grown accustomed to. The mental calculation of my worth based on appearance, career, and status. I could practically hear the disappointment when Cassandra inevitably told him later about my struggling internet thing, as she called it. "Drinks are in the kitchen," my mother announced, already moving away. "Dinner in 20 minutes. Don't be late to the table like last year, Eliza." I had been 10 minutes late last Thanksgiving, because I was on an emergency call with my developer team in Singapore. We were in the middle of a major platform update, and a critical bug had been discovered. Those 10 minutes had saved us thousands of dollars and potentially prevented a security breach. But all my family knew was that I was late and that I had been on my phone instead of helping in the kitchen. In the kitchen, I poured myself a glass of white wine and leaned against the counter, watching my mother and Cassandra work in perfect synchronization, a well-rehearsed dance of domestic excellence I had never quite mastered. "So," my mother began, not looking up from the cranberry sauce she was stirring, "are you still doing that website thing?" That website thing was Adaptive Edge, an AI-driven learning platform I had founded 4 years ago. We had started with educational content for children with learning differences, but had expanded to serve adult learners, corporate training programs, and specialized technical education. "Yes, Mom, the company's still going strong." She made a non-committal humming sound. "That's nice, dear. I just worry, no health insurance, no stability. Your father and I aren't getting any younger, and someday we won't be around to help you out." The assumption that I needed their financial help stung more than it should have. I hadn't taken money from them since college. In fact, last year, when my father mentioned concerns about their retirement portfolio during a rare moment of vulnerability, I had anonymously arranged for a financial advisor to contact them with special rates for valued community members. I'd paid for the service myself. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "I'm doing fine, Mom. The business is growing." "Well, that's what you said last year," she replied, handing me a stack of plates. "Be a dear and set the dining room table. Use the good china. Cassandra just polished it." I took the plates and retreated to the dining room, arranging them around my mother's elaborate centerpiece. As I placed each napkin and aligned each fork, I thought about how different my life looked from the outside versus the reality. From their perspective, I was stubbornly clinging to a failing startup, working too many hours for too little return, refusing to get a real job as my father often suggested. They saw my modest clothing, my old car, my lack of visible success markers as proof of my failure. What they didn't know was that 2 years ago, Adaptive Edge had secured $3.7 million in Series A funding. Last year, we'd turned our first profit, and just 3 months ago, we'd closed a Series B round of $22 million that valued the company at just over $120 million. I owned 42% of that company. I kept it quiet for a lot of reasons, partly because we were still in a delicate growth phase, partly because I'd learned early that publicity brought copycats and complications, but mostly, if I was honest with myself, because I was waiting until success was so undeniable, so overwhelming, that when I finally revealed it, there could be no caveats, no buts, no qualifications from my family. "Eliza, are you just going to stand there daydreaming?" Cassandra breezed past, me with a gravy boat. "Dad's about to carve the turkey." I finished setting the table and took my place, at the far end, next to Cousin Derek and across from Martin. Not coincidentally, I was sure, the furthest seat from my father at the head of the table. The family hierarchy made physical. "Before we eat," my father announced, standing with carving knife in hand, "I'd like to say how thankful I am to have the family together, and to share some exciting news." He beamed at my brother. "Tyler has just been promoted to vice president of operations at Gateway Financial." Applause broke out around the table. My mother actually clapped her hands together in delight. "At 32, my father continued proudly, he's the youngest VP in company history. And," he added with a significant look, "they've included stock options with a vesting schedule that could make him a very wealthy man in 5 years. More applause. Tyler grinned, accepting the praise as his due. "Just following your footsteps, Dad," he said, raising his glass. "Working hard and playing the long game." "And Cassandra," my mother chimed in, "tell everyone your news." My sister straightened in her seat, diamond earrings catching the light. "Martin and I are closing on a house in Dunthorpe next month. 4 bedrooms, pool, and garden space for entertaining. Not to mention," Martin added, It's an excellent investment opportunity. Property in that area has appreciated 12% in the last 2 years alone. Smart thinking, my father nodded approvingly. That's how wealth is built. Property, solid career advancement, prudent investments. His eyes drifted to me briefly, then away. The unspoken comparison hung in the air. What about you, Eliza? Aunt Patricia asked, perhaps feeling a twinge of sympathy for me. Any news with your, computer business? All eyes turned to me, expressions ranging from polite interest to barely concealed pity. It's been a productive year, I said simply. We've expanded our team and our product offerings. Still working from that co-working space downtown? Tyler asked, cutting into his turkey. We have our own offices now, I replied, in the Pearl District. Must be expensive, my father frowned. Those trendy neighborhoods charge a premium for rent. We got a good deal, I said, which was true. We'd purchased the entire building 6 months ago when commercial real estate prices temporarily dipped. Well, I think it's nice you're pursuing your passion, my mother said in that tone that managed to be both supportive and condescending simultaneously. Not everyone needs to chase the corner office and the big salary. Exactly, Cassandra. Agreed, reaching for the cranberry sauce. Eliza's always marched to her own drummer. Remember when she turned down that internship at Richardson and Bloom to work on that coding project in college? I remember, my father said dryly. That internship could have been the foundation of a real career. Instead of wasting all that, expensive education, Tyler added with a chuckle. It wasn't wasted, I said quietly. I use what I learned every day. Of course you do, honey. My mother patted my hand. Now, who wants more sweet potatoes? The conversation moved on, flowing around me like water around a stone. I ate mechanically, tasting nothing, nodding at appropriate intervals. My phone buzzed in my pocket, probably a message from Lauren, my COO, about our upcoming meeting with Microsoft. They were interested in a major licensing deal for our adaptive learning algorithms, but I didn't check it. I'd learned that looking at my phone during family gatherings only reinforced their perception that I was constantly putting out fires in my little business. As dinner wound down, we migrated to the living room for coffee and dessert. The TV was on in the background, my father's insistence as he never missed the evening financial news. I sat in the armchair near the window, slightly removed from the main conversation, which had turned to Tyler's golf game and the connections he was making on the course. So, Eliza, Martin said, sitting on the couch adjacent to me, clearly, having drawn the short straw of making conversation with the family underachiever. Your sister tells me you run some kind of educational website? It's an adaptive learning platform, I corrected gently. We use AI to personalize educational content based on individual learning patterns. Interesting, he said, in a tone that suggested it was anything but. Is there much demand for that sort of thing? Before I could answer, Tyler snorted from across the room. She's been saying that for years. If it was such a great idea, wouldn't someone bigger have done it already? Or bought her out? Actually, I began, but Cassandra cut in. Eliza's very passionate about it, she said, as if explaining a child's attachment to an imaginary friend. She's always been idealistic. There's nothing wrong with idealism, my father said, adjusting the volume on the TV. But at some point, you have to face reality. Sustainability matters. Financial security matters. I am being realistic, I insisted, feeling a familiar frustration building. The education technology market is growing exponentially, and we're positioned to— Oh, honey, my mother interrupted. We're not saying your little project isn't worthwhile. It's admirable, really. But wouldn't it be nice to have something more substantial to fall back on? It's not a little project, I said, my voice tight, and I don't need something to fall back on. The startup failure rate is over 90%. Tyler said, as if reciting from a textbook. That's just statistics, sis. No shame in it. Turn it up, my father suddenly said, gesturing at the TV. They're talking about the tech sector. The room fell silent as the financial news anchor appeared on screen, standing before a colorful graph. Tech stocks showed strong performance today, with several notable standouts in the education and artificial intelligence sectors. Leading the pack is Adaptive Edge, whose recent partnership announcement with Microsoft sent shares soaring in after-hours trading. I froze. We hadn't announced the Microsoft deal yet. It wasn't supposed to go public until tomorrow morning after all the paperwork was finalized. Someone must have leaked it. A stock ticker scrolled across the bottom of the screen, and there it was. ADPT, Pluser 23, 4%. Adaptive Edge, the anchor continued. The brainchild of CEO Eliza Chen has been quietly revolutionizing the educational technology space. With today's Microsoft announcement and rumors of additional major partnerships in the pipeline, market analysts are valuing the company at approximately $320 million, making Chen one of the youngest female tech founders to break the $100 million personal net worth threshold. The anchor moved on to other stocks, but the room had gone completely still. 6 pairs of eyes slowly turned to me, expressions ranging from confusion to shock. Eliza? My father said finally, his voice strained. Is there something you want to tell us? I took a sip of my coffee, feeling a strange calm settle over me. After years of dismissal, years of being patronized and underestimated, the moment had arrived without my planning it. Part of me wanted to downplay it, to continue the habit of modesty that had become second nature. But a stronger part, the part that had been silenced at this table for too long, refused to shrink this moment. Actually, I said, meeting my father's gaze directly, there is something I've been meaning to tell you all. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for hours, though it was probably only seconds. I set my coffee cup down carefully on the side table, aware of every eye in the room fixed on me. Adaptive Edge isn't just a little project or a website thing, I began, my voice steadier than I expected. It's a company I founded 4 years ago that now employs 78 people full-time. We have offices in Portland, Singapore, and as of last month, London. My mother's hand fluttered to her throat. But you never said anything. I tried, I replied simply. Many times. But no one was interested in hearing it. Surely you didn't expect us to understand the technical details, my father countered, already shifting into defense. You know we're not computer people. I smiled slightly. I didn't need you to understand the code, Dad. I just needed you to believe it mattered. Cassandra leaned forward, her perfect eyebrows drawn together. Wait, did that news anchor say your company is worth hundreds of millions? Our current valuation is $320 million, I confirmed. That's up from $120 million after our Series B funding 3 months ago. The Microsoft partnership accelerated things. I turned to Martin, whose expression had transformed from polite boredom to stunned reassessment. To answer your earlier question, yes, there is quite a bit of demand for adaptive learning technology, especially now that remote education has become essential. Tyler stood abruptly and walked to the bar cart in the corner, pouring himself a generous whiskey. This doesn't make sense, he muttered. You drive a Honda. You wear the same clothes for years. You live in that tiny apartment downtown. Not anymore, I said. I bought a house in the West Hills last month. I haven't moved in yet. I've been too busy with the Microsoft negotiations. I paused. And I drive a Honda because it's reliable and environmentally responsible. The clothes are because I care about sustainable fashion and quality over quantity. Not everything is about showing off, Tyler. My Aunt Patricia suddenly burst into laughter, breaking the tension. Good for you, Eliza. I always knew you had something special brewing. This was a generous revision of history. She had never indicated any such belief. But I appreciated the attempt to bridge the awkwardness. My father cleared his throat, toggling between disbelief and a dawning desire to somehow take credit. Well, this is unexpected news. Why didn't you tell us when you got this? Initial funding you mentioned? I took a deep breath, considering how honest to be. The wound of their dismissal was still fresh, despite my success. But this moment wasn't about vengeance. It was about finally being seen. When I started Adaptive Edge, I was working out of my apartment, using my savings from the 2 years I spent at that tech consultancy job you all thought was a waste of time. Remember when I came to Sunday dinner and tried to explain the adaptive algorithm I was developing? The silence was answer enough. Cassandra, you checked your watch 11 times during that conversation. Mom, you interrupted to ask if I was dating anyone. Dad, you changed the subject to Tyler's promotion. None of you asked a single question about what I was building. My mother's expression wavered between guilt and defensiveness. We were just concerned, Eliza. You were working all the time, barely socializing. That's not healthy. When Tyler works 70 hours a week, it's dedication, I pointed out. When I do it, it's concerning. Do you see the double standard? My father set his jaw. That's different. Tyler was on an established career path with clear benchmarks of success. And now? I asked quietly. What would you call what? I've achieved? He didn't answer, but the muscle twitching in his cheek told me everything I needed to know. The goalposts were already moving in his mind, finding new ways to qualify my success, to make it somehow less than my siblings more. Conventional paths. Look, I said, softening my tone. I didn't keep things quiet to hurt anyone or to plan some dramatic reveal. I just learned early on that explaining my work to people who had already decided it wasn't valuable was exhausting and demoralizing. So I stopped trying. Cassandra set her wine glass down carefully. But surely after you got funding, or started making money. The first $1 million contract we signed was 2 years ago, I interrupted. I came to Dad's birthday dinner. That weekend, excited to finally share news I thought you'd respect. But before I could even mention it, you all spent 20 minutes discussing how I should get a real job with benefits, because I'd mentioned having a cold that week. Tyler winced, perhaps remembering his own contribution to that conversation. Something about how I couldn't afford to get sick without proper employment. So I made a decision that night, I continued. I decided to stop seeking validation where it wasn't being offered. I focused on the people who did believe in me, my team, our investors, our clients, and most importantly, the students whose learning experiences we were transforming. You must think we're terrible people, my mother said softly, tears forming in her eyes. No, Mom, I don't. And I meant it. I think you're people who value what you understand. The problem wasn't that you thought I was failing. It's that you never truly tried to understand what success in my world even looked like. An uncomfortable silence settled over the room. The TV had moved on to other stories, but no one reached for the remote. The remnants of our Thanksgiving dessert sat forgotten on plates around the room. So, what exactly does your company do? Martin asked finally, breaking the tension. The question, so simple, so fundamental, asked years too late, almost, made me laugh. We create personalized learning software that adapts in real time to how an individual processes information, I explained. Our algorithms identify when someone is struggling with a concept and automatically adjust the teaching method. For a visual learner, content might be presented through diagrams and videos. For someone who learns better through narrative, the same concept is explained through stories and examples. That sounds actually fascinating, my father admitted reluctantly. It is, I agreed. We started with applications for children with learning differences, dyslexia, ADHD, autism, spectrum, kids who were falling through the cracks in traditional education. We've expanded to adult education, professional training, and specialized fields like medical education. Is that why Microsoft is interested? Tyler asked, his tone more respectful than I'd heard from him in years. I nodded. They want to integrate our system into their educational platforms. The deal includes both licensing and a research partnership. I hesitated, then added, it's worth $45 million over 3 years, plus performance incentives. A low whistle escaped Tyler's lips before he could stop himself. But the part I'm most proud of, I continued, is our impact metrics. Over 200,000 students who were previously struggling academically have achieved proficiency through our programs. We're helping people learn who had been written off by traditional education, told they weren't smart enough, or didn't try hard enough, when really they just needed information presented differently. For the first time all evening, I saw genuine interest in my mother's eyes. That's why you were so passionate about this, isn't it? Because of Jamie. Jamie was my cousin who had struggled with severe dyslexia, eventually dropping out of high school despite being incredibly intelligent. Partly, I acknowledged, but also because I've always been interested in how people learn, how minds work differently. Remember how I used to make those elaborate study guides in high school? That was the beginning. I was already exploring how to present information in multiple formats. I remember those, Cassandra said slowly. You made me one for AP Chemistry. It was the only reason I passed. A memory surfaced, Cassandra grudgingly thanking me for the study guide, but attributing her passing grade to last-minute cramming. When our parents asked, it was a small thing, but part of a larger pattern. So, what happens now? My father asked, shifting into practical mode, his businessman's mind already calculating new equations with this updated information. We scale, I said simply. Microsoft is just the beginning. We have meetings next quarter with 3 major university systems and 2 international education ministries. And we're developing a new platform specifically for workforce retraining, helping adults transition into technology fields. That's impressive, he admitted, the word seemingly difficult for him to form. Thank you, I said, accepting the hard-won compliment. It's been a long road. And to think we've been treating you like you were struggling all this time, my mother said, dabbing at her eyes. Why didn't you at least tell us about the money, Eliza? We've been so worried about your future. I considered her question carefully. Money was never the primary goal, Mom. The vision mattered more. And honestly, I guess I wanted to prove, to myself more than anyone, that I could do this on my own terms. But still, Tyler interjected, you could have mentioned becoming a millionaire. That's kind of a big deal. I laughed softly. Would you have believed me if I'd told you? His silence was telling. Besides, I added, I'm not that interested in flaunting wealth. Most of my net worth is still in company equity. I live comfortably but not extravagantly. I'd rather reinvest in growing the company and our foundation. Foundation? Aunt Patricia perked up. We established the Adaptive Learning Foundation last year, I explained. We donate our technology to underserved schools and provide grants for research into learning differences. We're also developing programs for adult literacy and refugee education. My father's expression changed subtly, a new calculation happening behind his eyes. That's very noble, Eliza, but you should be careful about giving too much away. You need to protect your assets. And there it was, the pivot. To viewing my achievement primarily through the lens of personal gain, the immediate impulse to hoard rather than share. It was so predictable I almost smiled. The foundation has its own endowment, I assured him. And our research there actually drives commercial innovation too. It's not charity. It's part of our ecosystem. Cassandra stood and walked to the sideboard. returning with the bottle of expensive champagne they'd opened earlier to celebrate Tyler's promotion. "I think," she said with forced brightness, "this calls for a proper toast to Eliza's success." Everyone murmured agreement. Glasses were refilled, and suddenly I was the center of attention in a way I'd never been in this house. It felt strange, hollow, yet satisfying, like winning a game you'd stopped caring about halfway through. As the initial shock wore off, the questions became more specific, more business-oriented. How had we secured our initial funding? What was our revenue model? What were the terms of the Microsoft deal? My father and Tyler especially shifted into a familiar mode, dissecting business strategy, offering unsolicited advice on scaling and exit planning. "You should consider acquisition offers now while your valuation is hot," Tyler advised with the confidence of someone who had never built a company. "Cash out while you can." "We're not looking to sell," I replied firmly. "We're building for long-term impact." "But the technology sector is so volatile," my father countered. "Today's breakthrough is tomorrow's obsolete system. That's why we've diversified our research streams and built a sustainable revenue model," I explained. "We're not just riding a trend, we're creating fundamental tools that address how human cognition works. That doesn't become obsolete." I watched as they attempted to reshape my achievement into something that fit their worldview, a lucky break, a temporary success, or at best, a strategic financial play. They couldn't quite grasp that I was motivated by something beyond status and money. "You know," Martin chimed in, "I have a colleague who specializes in intellectual property law for tech firms. You should really talk to him about strengthening your patent portfolio before these bigger companies try to work around your technology." I bit back a smile. "We have 17 granted patents and 23 pending applications across 6 jurisdictions. Our legal team has been quite thorough." "Oh," Martin deflated slightly. "That's comprehensive." "I'm curious, Aunt," Patricia said, more perceptive than the others. "When that news reporter mentioned your net worth, you didn't seem surprised. But you did seem surprised that the Microsoft deal was public. Why is that?" Leave it to Patricia to notice the detail. Others missed. "The Microsoft announcement wasn't supposed to go public until tomorrow morning," I explained. "Someone leaked it early, which is frustrating but not catastrophic. As for my net worth," I shrugged. "Forbes included me in their 30 under 40 list last month. The information has been out there, just not somewhere my family would likely see it." "You were in Forbes?" Cassandra's voice rose an octave. "Why wouldn't you mention that?" "For the same reason I didn't mention any of this," I gestured around the room. "It didn't seem like information that would be valued here." A heavy silence followed, the truth of those words settling uncomfortably over the gathering. "I should go," I said finally, standing and smoothing my sweater. "I have an early conference call with our Singapore team." "But we haven't even had time to process all this," my mother protested. "There's so much more to discuss." "There will be time," I assured her, though I wasn't entirely convinced. "This isn't a one-conversation topic." As I gathered my coat and purse, I felt the dynamics of the room shifting, realigning around this new reality. My father stood awkwardly by the fireplace, looking like he wanted to say something profound but couldn't quite find the words. Tyler examined his expensive watch with less satisfaction than he'd displayed earlier. Cassandra hovered nearby, suddenly eager to help me with my coat. "Your pie was delicious, by the way," she offered, a small olive branch. "Thanks," I smiled. "Grandma's recipe." "Eliza," my father said finally as I reached the door. We're proud of you. You know that, right?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the complicated tangle of emotions behind his eyes. Genuine pride wrestling with embarrassment, admiration tinged with the discomfort of having been proven wrong. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means something to me. It always has." My mother embraced me tightly, whispering apologies and congratulations in a confused jumble. I hugged her back, feeling neither triumphant nor bitter, just tired and somehow lighter. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the world fresh and glistening under the streetlights. I unlocked my Honda, which I really did drive by choice, despite what my family might think, and slid behind the wheel. Through the window of my parents' house, I could see them still gathered in the living room, gesturing animatedly, no doubt discussing this unexpected development in my life story. As I drove away from the neighborhood I'd grown up in, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me here. 4 years of building in silence. 4 years of enduring dismissal while quietly creating something transformative. 4 years of letting my family believe I was failing while I was actually soaring. There was no dramatic satisfaction in their shock, no vindictive pleasure in their scramble to recalibrate. Instead, I felt a gentle release, like setting down a heavy object I'd been carrying for too long. Their validation, it turned out, wasn't the prize I'd once thought it was. I stopped at a red light and checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Lauren, my COO, and a text. The Microsoft news leaked, major outlets picking it up, stock jumping in after hours, call me ASAP. Below it was another message, this one from Mia, our head of product development. Jamie called. The dyslexia module tests came back with 94% improvement rates. We did it, Eliza. We really did it. I smiled to myself in the darkness of my car. This impact, these results, this team that believed in the vision from the beginning, this was the real victory. Not the stunned expressions around my parents' dinner table, but the thousands of students who would now have access to education, tailored to their needs. The light turned green, and I accelerated forward, leaving behind the weight of unmet expectations and the prison of seeking approval from those who couldn't see the future I was building. Ahead lay the Pacific Northwest night, vast with possibility, and beyond that, the world we were quietly changing one mind at a time. As I drove toward downtown, toward the life I'd built on my own terms, I thought about all the other quiet builders out there, the people working on visions others couldn't yet see, enduring dismissal and disbelief while methodically creating the future. My story wasn't unique. It was playing out in garages and apartments and co-working spaces across the globe. The difference was, tonight my story had finally become visible. And maybe, just maybe, that visibility would make space for others like me, the underestimated, the dismissed, the ones who didn't fit the expected mold of success. My phone rang again, Lauren, persistent as always. I connected it to the car's Bluetooth. I'm on my way to the office, I told her. Tell everyone to order dinner, we've got work to do. Because that was the truth beneath the dramatic revelation my family had witnessed tonight. The TV announcement, the shocked faces, the hurried reassessments, those were just the surface. The real story was the work itself, the daily commitment to a vision, the quiet persistence that had gotten us here. And tomorrow, regardless of what had transpired at my parents' dinner table, that work would continue. Because I hadn't built Adaptive Edge to prove anyone wrong. I'd built it to make something right. I arrived at our Portland headquarters just after 8, the sky fully dark now, the city lights reflecting in puddles across the parking lot. Our office occupied the top 3 floors of a renovated industrial building in the Pearl District. Exposed brick walls, high ceilings with wooden beams, walls of windows overlooking the city and the distant mountains. Not the stereotypical glass and chrome, tech startup space, but something with history, character, solidity. The security guard nodded as I passed through the lobby. Evening, Ms. Chen. Quite a few of your team still upstairs. Thanks, Roy. Busy night. The elevator carried me to the 5th floor, where the main workspace hummed with activity despite the holiday. About 20 people were gathered in our central collaboration area. Developers, marketing specialists, our legal team, and the core leadership group. Laptops open, takeout containers scattered across tables, the energy of focused intensity filling the room. Lauren spotted me first, breaking away from a huddle near the digital wall display. My COO was a former management consultant who joined Adaptive Edge after experiencing our platform's impact on her nephew with ADHD. Short-cropped silver hair framed a face that could deliver hard truths without flinching, but her eyes lit up with genuine warmth as she approached. "There she is, our accidental celebrity," she said, handing me a cup of coffee. "So much for our carefully orchestrated announcement strategy." "Any idea who leaked it?" I asked, accepting the coffee. "Gratefully. We've narrowed it down to someone at Microsoft's PR department. They're mortified and apologizing profusely." She shrugged. "But honestly, the timing couldn't be better. Markets responding even more positively than we projected." I glanced at the display wall where our stock ticker showed a 31% gain in after-hours trading, up from the 23% when I'd left my parents' house. Below it, a social media dashboard tracked mentions of Adaptive Edge, the graph line spiking dramatically upward. "The official press package is ready to go at 6 a.m., said Talia, our communications director, approaching with a tablet. "We've adjusted the messaging to acknowledge the early leak while maintaining the core announcements. We've also prepared you for the interview requests. Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, and TechCrunch have all reached out already." I nodded, scanning the modified press release on her tablet. "Let's make sure we emphasize the accessibility aspects of the Microsoft integration. That's the real win here, reaching millions more students." Talia smiled. "Already highlighted in the second paragraph." I moved through the room, checking in with different team members, reviewing the technical integration timeline with our development lead, discussing security protocols with IT. These people, this dedicated, brilliant team, had believed in our vision when it was nothing but algorithms and wireframes. They'd worked late nights and weekends, solved seemingly impossible problems, celebrated small victories that no one else understood. They were the reason Adaptive Edge existed, the reason we'd succeeded where so many other edtech startups had failed. Not just their technical skills or business acumen, but their fundamental belief that education could be transformed through technology that adapted to human needs, rather than forcing humans to adapt to rigid systems. After making the rounds, I retreated to my office, a modest space with a standing desk, walls covered in whiteboards, and a small sitting area where I often held informal meetings. Through the windows, Portland's skyline glittered in the clear. Night after the rain. I sank into my chair, the events of the evening catching up with me. The expressions on my family's faces kept replaying in my mind. The shock, the disbelief, the hurried recalculations. Part of me wished I could have captured those moments, preserved them as vindication for all the times I'd been dismissed. But another part recognized how hollow such vindication really was. A soft knock at my open door pulled me from my thoughts. Jamie stood there, hesitant to interrupt. My cousin, the one with dyslexia who had partly inspired this journey, had joined our user experience team last year after completing a design program. "I heard you had an interesting Thanksgiving," he said, leaning against the doorframe. I smiled tiredly. "News travels fast. Mia mentioned you were at your parents' when the Microsoft announcement leaked." He raised an eyebrow. I can only imagine Aunt Catherine's face. "It was illuminating," I admitted. 4 years of being the family disappointment erased in about 4 seconds of financial news. Jamie came in and took a seat across from me. Unlike the rest of my family, he had never questioned my vision. When I'd shown him the earliest prototype of our dyslexia module, he'd tested it for hours, providing invaluable feedback that shaped the core of our platform. "Does it feel good?" he asked. "The recognition?" I considered the question carefully. "Not in the way I thought it would. I always imagined this moment of triumph, you know? This perfect vindication. But when it actually happened, it felt empty. He finished for me. Not empty exactly, just less important than I expected. Like I'd been climbing a mountain, so focused on reaching a specific peak, only to get there and realize I'd actually been headed somewhere else entirely all along. Jamie nodded thoughtfully. The real summit was the work itself. Exactly, I said, grateful for his understanding. Speaking of which, Mia said the new dyslexia module tests came back with amazing results. His face lit up. Eliza, it's revolutionary. We tested with 200 students across 3 school districts. Kids who were reading 2 grade levels behind are now testing at or above their peers. And not just performance, their confidence, their willingness to engage with text. He shook his head in wonder. If I'd had this when I was 12, my whole life might have been different. This moment of genuine impact felt infinitely more meaningful than my family's belated recognition. Jamie had lived the struggle our technology was designed to address. He knew what it meant to be labeled a failure by an educational system that couldn't accommodate different ways of processing information. We're presenting the results at the Education Conference in Boston next month, he continued. The researchers want you to join the panel discussion. I'll be there, I promised. This is exactly what we need to be highlighting as we scale with Microsoft. We discussed the implementation details for a while longer before Jamie left to join the others. I turned back to my computer, intending to review the final contract details, but found myself distracted by memories of earlier days. The first prototype we'd built, so crude but so promising. The initial rejections from investors who couldn't see beyond traditional education models. The tiny office we'd rented with our first seed funding, 6 of us crammed into a space meant for 3. Working through weekends, fueled by conviction and coffee. I remembered the first school that had agreed to pilot our program, an underfunded public school in East Portland with a high percentage of students with learning differences. The skeptical teachers who became our most passionate advocates after seeing their struggling students suddenly engage with material in ways they never had before. All those moments, the setbacks and breakthroughs, the late-night coding sessions and early morning pitch meetings, had been invisible to my family. They had seen only what I wasn't doing, attending law school like my father wanted, pursuing a conventional corporate career like my siblings, displaying the expected markers of success they understood. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. We're still processing everything from tonight. Your father and I would love to have lunch soon. Just us. So much to talk about. I stared at the message, emotions conflicting within me. Part of me was still the little girl who had desperately wanted her parents' approval, who had shown them report cards and science fair ribbons with hopeful eyes. Another part was the woman who had learned to find validation elsewhere, who had built something meaningful without their understanding or support. Before I could decide how to respond, Lauren appeared at my door. The team wants you in the main space, she said. We have something to show you. Curious, I followed her back to the collaboration area where the team had gathered. The room fell quiet as I entered. Faces turned expectantly toward me. Mia stepped forward, tablet in hand. We've been working on something in secret for a while now. Given tonight's events, it seemed like the right time to share it. She tapped the tablet, and the main display wall lit up with a video compilation. It started with footage from our very first user testing session 4 years ago, a dyslexic middle schooler named Marcus struggling with a reading passage, then lighting up with sudden comprehension as our early algorithm adjusted the text presentation to match his processing style. I can read it now, he exclaimed in the video, looking up with astonishment. The words aren't jumping around anymore. The compilation continued. Testimonials from teachers describing transformations in their classrooms, parents tearfully recounting how their children had gone from frustrated and defeated to confident and engaged. Adult learners who had thought education had passed them by, now mastering new skills through our platform. Between these impact stories were interspersed moments from our company journey: the first office, our initial funding celebration, product launches, team milestones. Many were moments I'd forgotten had been captured. Me sleeping under my desk during our first deadline crunch, giving an impromptu pep talk when a major feature failed testing, dancing with the team when we closed our Series A round. As the video played, I felt my throat tighten with emotion. This was the true story of Adaptive Edge. Not the stock price or the valuation or the Microsoft deal, but these human moments of connection and transformation. These lives changed, these barriers broken, these possibilities opened. The final clip was from last month, a classroom in a rural Oregon school where every student was engaged with our platform, learning at their own pace, in their own style. The camera panned across faces absorbed in discovery, then zoomed out to show the classroom wall where a banner hung. Learn your way. The video ended, and the room burst into applause. Not for the presentation, I realized, but for me. For us, for what we had built together. Mia stepped forward again. We created this as part of our 5-year anniversary materials, but tonight seemed like the right moment. Because no matter what the stock market does tomorrow, or what the press says about the Microsoft deal, or how many more companies want to partner with us, this is the heart of Adaptive Edge. This impact, these stories, this mission. I looked around at these people who had taken a chance on a vision most couldn't see, who had worked tirelessly to make it real, who understood the true value of what we were building in a way my family never had. Thank you, I said simply, words failing to capture the depth of my gratitude. This is everything. The team dispersed back to their tasks, the energy in the room renewed by the reminder of our purpose. I stepped over to the windows, looking out at the city lights, processing the contrast between the hollow validation of my family's belated recognition and the profound meaning of this team's consistent belief. My phone buzzed again. Another text from my mother. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart. Why don't you bring someone from your company to lunch? We'd love to understand more about what you do." I smiled slightly at the irony. For years, I had craved exactly this interest, this acknowledgement. Now that it had arrived, prompted not by genuine curiosity but by public validation and financial success, it felt like too little, too late. Yet part of leadership, part of growth, was recognizing when to let go of old wounds, when to open doors rather than close them. I texted back, "Lunch sounds good. I'll bring Jamie. He's been with the company from the start and can explain our technology better than anyone." Her response came quickly, "Wonderful. Your cousin Jamie? I didn't realize he worked with you." "He's our lead UX designer for learning difference modules," I replied. "The dyslexia program that's changing lives across the country? He helped design it." There was a longer pause before her next message. I had no idea. We have so much catching up to do. Indeed we did. Perhaps bringing Jamie would help bridge the gap, help them see that what we were building wasn't just a business success story, but a human one. Maybe they could begin to understand the mission that had driven me when financial reward was still a distant possibility. I pocketed my phone and rejoined the team, diving back into the work at hand. The Microsoft integration would require significant adjustments to our core systems, new security protocols, scalability enhancements. The next few months would be intense, challenging, transformative for Adaptive Edge. Around midnight, as the AI team was beginning to disperse, I stepped into our user testing lab, a space designed to look like a typical classroom, where we observed how students interacted with our platform. The room was empty now, the computer stations dark, but I could almost hear the echoes of discovery that had filled this space. The aha moments when something previously incomprehensible suddenly made sense. I sat at one of the workstations, running my fingers over the smooth surface of the desk. 4 years ago, this entire company had existed only in my imagination, in lines of code, in flowcharts and funding proposals rejected by investors who couldn't see the possibility. 4 years of work, of belief, of persistence despite dismissal and skepticism. Not just from my family, but from the entire industry. Personalized learning doesn't scale, they'd said. The market isn't big enough. Schools won't pay for technology. If this was possible, Google or Microsoft would already be doing it. Yet here we were, proving them all wrong, not out of spite, but out of vision. Seeing a need others had missed, a possibility others had dismissed, a future others couldn't imagine. My phone buzzed with a notification, a direct message on my rarely used social media account. I opened it to find a note from a former classmate. Just saw the news about Adaptive Edge and realized it's your company. I remember you talking about this idea in grad school. Amazing to see you made it happen. My daughter has processing issues, and her school just started using your platform. It's changing her life. Thank you. This message, from someone who had witnessed the earliest seeds of the vision, felt like the completion of a circle. Not the external validation from family who had dismissed the idea until it proved financially successful, but recognition from someone who had been there at the beginning, who was now experiencing the impact firsthand. I typed a quick reply, asking for specifics about her daughter's experience and offering to connect her with our user support team for any customizations that might help. This was the conversation that mattered, not about valuations or stock prices, but about real impact on real lives. As I left the testing lab, I caught my reflection in the darkened window, not the struggling entrepreneur my family had pitied, not the sudden success they now scrambled to acknowledge, but something more complex and more authentic. A builder, a problem solver, a person driven by purpose rather than validation. The Thanksgiving revelation hadn't changed who I was or what mattered to me. It had simply made visible to others what had been true all along. The real transformation had happened long before that TV announcement, in the quiet moments of persistence, in the commitment to a vision others couldn't see, in the daily choice to keep building despite dismissal. Back in my office, I found Lauren reviewing the final checklist for tomorrow's official announcement. "Everything on track for the morning?" I asked. She nodded, then studied me with her characteristic directness. "You seem different tonight, centered somehow." I considered her observation. I think I finally let go of something I've been carrying too long. The need for certain people to understand or validate what we're doing here. "Your family," she said. It wasn't a question. "They saw the financial success tonight, but they still don't really see the mission," I explained. And I realized, that's okay, they don't need to. The work matters anyway. Lauren smiled. "Reminds me of something my grandmother used to say. Don't expect people to understand a vision they haven't been given." Exactly, I agreed. They weren't given this vision. We were, and that's enough. We finished the preparations for the morning's announcement, refined the talking points for the inevitable media inquiries, and finally called it a night around 1 a.m. The building was quiet now, most of the team gone, just security and a few dedicated developers remaining. As I gathered my things to leave, my phone lit up with an email notification. A message from one of our earliest investors, a woman who had taken a chance on Adaptive Edge when most venture capitalists wouldn't even take a meeting. "Saw the news tonight," she wrote. "Remember when we sat in that coffee shop 4 years ago and you showed me that crude prototype on your laptop? Remember what I said then? The people who reject this will be kicking themselves someday. Congratulations, Eliza." Not on the Microsoft deal or the stock price, but on staying true to the vision when it would have been easier to compromise or give up. The world is better because you persisted. I read the message twice, feeling a surge of gratitude for this person who had seen the potential when so many others hadn't. She had invested not just in a business proposition, but in a vision of what education could become. Driving home through the quiet streets of Portland, I reflected on the strange journey of the day. From family mockery to shocked recognition, from hollow validation to meaningful connection. The external circumstances of my life had changed, dramatically in the eyes of my family, but the reality had been unfolding steadily all along, visible to those who were paying attention, invisible to those who weren't. As I approached my apartment building, I made a decision. Tomorrow, after the official announcement and press calls, I would finally visit the house I'd purchased in the West Hills. I'd been too busy to properly move in, using the renovation process as an excuse to delay, but it was time to fully step into this new chapter. Not because I had something to prove to my family or anyone else, but because I had nothing to prove. The house, a mid-century modern with walls of glass overlooking the forest and mountains beyond, represented not status or validation, but possibility. Space to think, to create, to host the team for celebrations, to build the next phase of adaptive edge in surroundings that inspired innovation. I would bring Jamie to lunch with my parents next week. I would answer their questions about the company, accept their belated interest with grace rather than resentment. I would invite them to tour our offices, to see the user testing lab, to understand as much as they were capable of understanding. Not because I needed their approval anymore, but because I no longer needed it. That freedom, from the hunger for validation, from the weight of being misunderstood, was perhaps the most valuable thing I'd gained, more precious than any valuation or partnership deal. As I pulled into my parking space, my phone buzzed with one final message of the night. AI, text from an unknown number. Ms. Chen, this is Marcus Williams. You might not remember me, but I was the first kid to test your reading program back in middle school. I'm a freshman at Oregon State now, studying computer science because of what your technology showed me was possible. My professor mentioned your company in class today, and I just wanted to say thank you. You changed the path of my life. Marcus, the boy from our very first user test, whose astonished face had been captured in the video compilation. Now a computer science student, pursuing possibilities that had once seemed closed to him. This was success. This was validation. This was what mattered. I saved his message, making a mental note to invite him to tour our offices, perhaps discuss internship possibilities. The circle continuing, expanding, creating new possibilities with each revolution. Tomorrow would bring press conferences and stock market analyses, investor calls, and partnership discussions. Important work, necessary work. But tonight, as I looked up at the clearing sky where stars were becoming visible above the city lights, I held on to this deeper truth. Real success wasn't measured in stock prices or family recognition, but in lives transformed, in barriers removed, in possibilities created where none had existed before. My family had finally seen my success tonight, but they had seen only its surface, the financial metrics, the corporate validation, the external markers of achievement. The deeper victory, the one that truly mattered, remained largely invisible to them, but gloriously visible to those whose lives were changing because of what we had built. And that, I realized as I unlocked my apartment door, was more than enough. That was everything. 3 months had passed since that Thanksgiving. Revelation. Winter had settled over Portland, transforming the city with crystalline mornings and early sunsets that painted the sky in watercolor hues of purple and gold. From the wall of windows in my new home, I watched the fog roll in from the Columbia River, wrapping the city below in a gentle embrace. The house in the West Hills had finally become home. Minimalist furnishings chosen for comfort rather than status. Walls adorned with artwork from local creators. Spaces designed for both solitude and collaboration. The dining room table I'd selected was large enough to host the leadership team for strategy sessions, while the kitchen island had already become a favorite gathering spot when team members came over for informal celebrations. I sipped my morning coffee, savoring the quiet before a day that promised to be anything but. Today marked another milestone for Adaptive Edge, the official launch of our integration with Microsoft's global education platform, making our technology accessible to millions of students across 140 countries. The culmination of countless hours of coding, testing, refining, and planning. My phone buzzed with a text from Lauren. "Car will pick you up at 8:30. Ready for this?" I typed back a quick, "Absolutely," though the truth was more complex. Public speaking had never been my favorite aspect of leadership, but this particular presentation felt significant beyond the usual product launch. It represented the scaling of our vision, the moment when what had once been a solution for a few could become a solution for many. As I descended the stairs to prepare for the day, I passed the framed items I'd arranged along the staircase wall. Not the typical collection of diplomas and awards, though those existed elsewhere in the house, but artifacts of our journey. The first user sketch of our interface, drawn on a coffee-stained napkin. The rejection letter from an early investor who'd dismissed our concept as too niche to scale, now an ironic trophy. A handwritten note from a teacher in rural Oregon. "You've given my students back their confidence. How do you thank someone for that?" In the kitchen, I assembled a quick breakfast while scanning the morning's news on my tablet. The business headlines were dominated by the Microsoft integration, with analysts predicting significant market impacts and highlighting Adaptive Edge as the emerging leader in personalized education technology. Most focused on the financial implications, but a few deeper pieces explored the potential social impact, the democratization of individualized learning, the possibility of reaching students in resource-poor environments, the reimagining of educational equity. One headline in particular caught my attention: "From Rejection to Revolution, How Eliza Chen's Persistence Changed the Face of Education." The article traced our journey from concept to global implementation, highlighting the numerous rejections and setbacks along the way. It included quotes from early doubters who now praised the vision, from educators who had witnessed transformations in their classrooms, and from students whose educational paths had been altered by our technology. The author had done her research, digging beyond the current success to understand the struggle that had preceded it. She'd interviewed our first employee, who recalled days when we couldn't make payroll, and I'd foregone my own salary to ensure everyone else got paid. She'd spoken with the principal of that first pilot school, who remembered his initial skepticism and subsequent amazement as test scores began to rise. She'd even tracked down 3 investors who had rejected our initial funding rounds, all of whom now admitted their error in judgment. What struck me most, however, was a quote from Jamie. "Eliza never built this for recognition or wealth. She built it because she saw a problem no one was solving, a system that labeled kids as failures when the real failure was in how they were being taught. She was told repeatedly that her approach wouldn't work, wouldn't scale, wouldn't find a market, but she never defined success by others' metrics. She defined it by impact." I set the tablet down, unexpectedly moved by my cousin's perception. He had captured something essential about the journey, something I hadn't fully articulated even to myself. The driving force had never been proving others wrong, though that had occasionally provided fuel during difficult stretches. It had been about solving a problem that mattered, about creating a solution that addressed a fundamental inequity in how education operated. The doorbell interrupted my reflection. Through the security camera, I saw my parents standing on the front step, looking slightly uncomfortable in the unfamiliar surroundings. I'd invited them to join me for the Microsoft launch event, a peace offering of sorts after the tension that had followed Thanksgiving. Our lunch the week after the revelation had been awkward but ultimately productive. Jamie's presence had helped bridge the gap, his ability to explain our technology in human terms making it accessible to them in ways my more technical descriptions never had. He'd shared his own story, how traditional education had labeled him as lazy or unintelligent because of his dyslexia, how his self-confidence had plummeted by middle school, how discovering that his brain processed information differently rather than deficiently had changed his self-perception. That lunch had marked the beginning of a cautious reconnection, not a return to our previous dynamics. That wasn't possible or desirable, but the establishment of something new, based on more authentic understanding and respect. They would never fully grasp the technical details of our work, but they had begun to comprehend its human impact, which was the part that mattered most. I opened the door to find them dressed formally, as if attending a corporate board meeting rather than a tech product launch. My father clutched a small gift bag, while my mother held a bouquet of elegant lilies. "We weren't sure what's appropriate for a day like this," my mother explained, handing me the flowers. "It feels like a graduation and a product launch all rolled into one." I accepted the bouquet with a smile. "It's perfect, Mom. Thank you both for coming." My father looked around the entry hall, taking in the modern architecture, the clean lines, the wall of awards I'd finally gotten around to hanging after keeping them in storage boxes for years. "This is quite a home, Eliza," he said, his tone conveying genuine admiration. "I can see why you chose it. The view must be spectacular." "Come see for yourself," I invited, leading them through to the main living area where floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the panorama of Portland below, the river beyond, and the mountains in the distance. My mother gasped softly. "It's breathtaking." "The property values in this neighborhood have appreciated significantly," my father noted, not quite able to abandon his habit of assessing everything through a financial lens. "A very sound investment." "That wasn't why I bought it," I replied gently. "I bought it because I wanted to wake up to this view every morning, to be reminded of perspective, of the bigger picture beyond daily challenges." He nodded, perhaps understanding more than I gave him credit for. Sometimes the best investments are the ones that pay dividends in ways that can't be calculated. It was the most poetic thing I'd ever heard him say, and it suggested a depth I hadn't always recognized beneath his pragmatic exterior. "Oh, before I forget," he said, handing me the small gift bag. "We wanted to give you something to mark the occasion." Inside was a small velvet box. I opened it to find an elegant jade pendant, similar in style to my grandmother's, but more refined. The stone a deeper, richer green. "We remembered you always wearing Mom's pendant," my mother explained. "This one reminded us of it, but—" "It's your own," my father finished. "Not a hand-me-down or an heirloom, but something new that honors where you came from while recognizing who you've become." The thoughtfulness of the gift surprised me. It acknowledged our history without being bound by it, recognized my independent path while honoring family connections. It was, in its way, the perfect symbol of our evolving relationship. "It's beautiful," I said sincerely. "I'll wear it today." We had time for a quick tour of the house before the car arrived. They asked genuine questions about my work now, listened with real interest to my explanations of the Microsoft integration challenges, admired the artwork I'd chosen. My father especially seemed to be making a concerted effort to see me more clearly, not just as his daughter who had unexpectedly succeeded, but as a professional with expertise in a field he was now trying to understand. When the doorbell rang again, it was Lauren, arriving in the company car rather than sending the driver up. She greeted my parents warmly. They had met at the office tour I'd arranged and had been unexpectedly compatible, sharing a dry sense of humor and no-nonsense approach to communication. "Ready for the big reveal?" she asked me, her eyes bright with anticipation. "The advance press has been extraordinary. We're trending globally." "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, fastening the new jade pendant around my neck. The Microsoft campus was buzzing with energy when we arrived. Press from major outlets had gathered, along with educators, industry analysts, and representatives from school districts around the country. In a touching gesture I hadn't anticipated, the company had also invited students from our original pilot schools, now 4 years older and thriving, thanks in part to the early adoption of our technology. Behind the scenes, in the green room where speakers prepared, I found my team already gathered. Mia was reviewing the demonstration sequence with our technical staff. Talia was briefing press contacts on key messaging points. Jamie was adjusting the slides for our presentation, ensuring they were optimized for various learning styles, a small but significant detail that reflected our company ethos. Microsoft's CEO greeted me warmly. His earlier skepticism about our approach long since converted to enthusiastic support. "The data from the preview rollout is exceeding all expectations," he confided. "Student engagement metrics are up 42% in the trial districts. Teachers are reporting significantly improved comprehension rates, especially among previously struggling learners." I nodded, gratified but not surprised. We had seen similar results in every implementation, regardless of scale. The approach worked because it addressed a fundamental truth about human cognition, that minds process information differently, and that system design should accommodate that diversity rather than penalizing it. As the auditorium filled with attendees, I peeked from behind the curtain, spotting my parents being ushered to reserved seats in the front row. They looked slightly out of place among the tech industry crowd, my father still in his traditional suit and tie, my mother elegant, in conservative business attire. But they were here, stepping into my world, making an effort to understand what mattered to me. It was more than I would have imagined possible a few months ago. Lauren approached, tablet in hand. "Final numbers just came in from the Asia-Pacific overnight trial," she murmured. 85% of students showed measurable improvement after just 2 weeks of implementation, most significant gains among non-native English speakers and those with processing differences. This was what success looked like, not the stock price that would undoubtedly surge after today's announcement, not the personal wealth that had so impressed my family, but these numbers, these lives being changed, these doors being opened for students who had previously been shut out of educational achievement. The lights dimmed, and Microsoft's CEO took the stage to welcome the audience and introduce the partnership. The screens behind him displayed both company logos side by side, the global tech giant and the once tiny startup, now united in a mission to transform education. 6 years ago, he began, a graduate student named Eliza Chen identified a fundamental flaw in how educational technology was being designed. While everyone else was focusing on delivering more content faster, she asked a different question. What if the problem isn't the content, but how it's delivered? What if we could create systems that adapt to how different minds learn, rather than forcing diverse learners to adapt to rigid systems? He continued, recounting our journey from concept to global implementation, highlighting the resistance we'd encountered along the way, the data that had ultimately validated our approach, and the transformative impact our technology was already having in classrooms around the world. Today, we're not just launching a product integration, he concluded. We're launching a fundamental reimagining of what educational technology can be. And I can think of no better person to guide us through this new landscape than the visionary, who saw its potential when most of us were still stuck in outdated paradigms. Please welcome Adaptive Edge founder and CEO, Eliza Chen. As I walked onto the stage to enthusiastic applause, I caught my parents' eyes in the front row. They were beaming with a pride that, for once, felt untarnished by reservation or qualification. They were proud, not because external markers had validated my worth, but because they were beginning to understand the meaning and impact of what I had built. Standing at the podium, looking out at the diverse audience, educators and technologists, investors and journalists, parents and students, I felt a moment of profound clarity. This journey had never been about proving my family wrong. It had been about proving that a different approach to education was possible, that technology could be designed to serve human diversity rather than flattening it, that the students who struggled in traditional systems weren't broken, the systems were. Thank you for that generous introduction, I began. 6 years ago, When I first proposed adapting educational technology to different learning styles rather than forcing students to adapt to technology, I was told repeatedly that it couldn't be done, that it wouldn't scale, that it wasn't marketable, that the education system was too entrenched to change. I paused, looking directly at the students from our pilot schools who were seated together in the middle section. Young people whose educational trajectories had been fundamentally altered by access to tools designed for their specific needs. But I had seen firsthand what happens when bright, capable students are treated as failures simply because information isn't being presented in ways their minds can process. I had watched creativity and potential being squandered because we were using one-size-fits-all approaches in a world where minds come in infinite variety. And I believed, deeply, fundamentally, that technology should serve human diversity, not diminish it. For the next 20 minutes, I walked the audience through the evolution of our platform, demonstrating how it identified individual learning patterns and adapted content presentation in real time. I showed comparisons of traditional educational software with our adaptive approach, highlighting how subtle changes in presentation could make profound differences in comprehension. Then came the moment I had been anticipating most, the introduction of our Global Accessibility Initiative, funded by a significant portion of our Microsoft partnership revenue, a program that would provide our technology free of charge to under-resourced schools worldwide, along with training and support for educators. Success isn't meaningful if it isn't accessible to all, I explained. That's why 20% of our partnership revenue is being directed to ensuring that students in low-resource environments have the same access to personalized learning as those in wealthy districts. Education is the great equalizer, but only if the tools of education recognize and support the inherent diversity of human minds. The announcement sparked a standing ovation, led by the educators in the audience who understood better than anyone the implications of such access for marginalized students. I caught Jamie's eye off stage, his smile confirming that this initiative, which we had planned in secret for months, represented the heart of why we had built Adaptive Edge in the first place. As the presentation concluded and the formal demonstration began, I stepped backstage, feeling a curious mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Lauren handed me a bottle of water, her expression conveying both congratulations and concern. "You okay?" she asked quietly. I nodded. "Just processing. It's a long way from that warehouse office with the leaky roof. And yet, the core vision hasn't changed at all," she observed. "Just the scale of implementation." She was right. From the earliest prototype to today's global platform, the fundamental premise had remained constant. Education should adapt to learners, not the other way around. What had changed was the world's readiness to embrace that premise, the accumulation of data that supported it, the evolution of technology that enabled it, the growing recognition that traditional approaches were failing too many students. After the formal presentation concluded, there was a reception for key stakeholders. I moved through the crowd, engaging with educators eager to implement the platform, answering technical questions from IT directors, reassuring administrators about integration timelines. Eventually, I found my way to where my parents stood, somewhat overwhelmed by the scale and significance of the event. My father, normally so articulate in business settings, seemed at a loss for words. "Eliza," he said finally, "I don't think I fully understood until today what you've actually built. This isn't just a successful company, it's a movement." The acknowledgement, so different from his earlier focus on financial metrics and market position, meant more than I had expected it to. "Thank you for seeing that," I replied. "That's exactly what it is." "And the scholarship program for under-resourced schools," my mother added. That was the moment when I thought I might cry. To think of all those children who would have been left behind. She didn't finish the thought, but she didn't need to. She was beginning to grasp the human impact of our work in a way that transcended business success or personal achievement. She was seeing what had driven me all along. As we talked, I noticed a small group approaching. Marcus, the student from our very first user test, now accompanied by his mother and younger sister. I had invited them as special guests after his message that night after Thanksgiving. "Ms. Chen," he said, extending his hand confidently, so different from the frustrated middle schooler I had first met. "I wanted to introduce my mom and my sister Zoe. She's using your program at her school now, and she wanted to thank you personally." Zoe, about 12 years old with the same warm brown eyes as her brother, looked up at me shyly. "Your program helped me learn to read better," she said simply. "Now I don't hate school anymore." From the mouth of a child, the most straightforward assessment of impact. Not market share or valuation or press coverage, but a young girl no longer dreading the classroom. This was the metric that mattered most. I introduced Marcus and his family to my parents, watching with quiet satisfaction as they engaged in genuine conversation. My father, especially, seemed fascinated by Marcus's journey from struggling student to computer science major, asking thoughtful questions about his experience with our platform and his plans for the future. Later, as the reception wound down and attendees began to disperse, I found myself standing alone for a moment near the window overlooking the Microsoft campus. The winter sun was setting early, casting long shadows across the manicured grounds, painting the clouds in shades of amber and rose. Jamie joined me, handing me a cup of tea. "Quite a day," he observed. "How does it feel to see your vision go?" "Global?" I considered his question carefully. "It feels like a beginning rather than an end," I replied. "There's so much more to do, so many more students to reach, so many ways to refine and improve the technology." He smiled. "That's why you succeeded where others failed. You never saw this as a destination, just a waypoint in a longer journey." "A journey you've been on from the start," I acknowledged. "I'm not sure I could have done this without you, without someone who understood firsthand why it mattered." "You would have found a way," he said confidently. "But I'm glad I got to be part of it, especially the dyslexia modules, designing those. It was like creating the tool I'd always needed, but never had." We stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the sunset deepen. The day's events had been gratifying, the public recognition meaningful, but this quiet moment of reflection with someone who understood the deeper significance was equally valuable. "Your parents seem different," Jamie observed. "More present. More engaged with what you're actually doing, not just the success of it." "They're trying," I agreed. "It's a work in progress, but there's genuine effort now. I think seeing the real-world impact today helped them understand in a way that financial news headlines couldn't." Before he could respond, Lauren approached. With tablet in hand, her expression a mix of excitement and apprehension. "Sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this. Our stock just jumped 68% on the partnership news, and..." She hesitated. "The Forbes real-time billionaire list just updated." I looked at the screen she extended toward me, seeing my name now ranked among the world's wealthiest individuals. It was surreal, almost dissociative, the number on the screen bearing no meaningful relationship to my daily existence or sense of self. "Congratulations," Lauren offered, correctly interpreting my ambivalence. "Or should I say my condolences on becoming a headline again?" I laughed softly. "Neither. Really, it's just a number. What matters is what we do with it." And I meant it. The wealth was a tool, a resource to be directed toward expanding our mission, funding our accessibility initiatives, developing new applications of our technology. It wasn't an endpoint or a victory in itself. As we prepared to leave the event, I found my parents waiting near the exit. My father held my coat, an unexpectedly thoughtful gesture from a man who had rarely shown such consideration in the past. "We thought we might take you to dinner to celebrate," my mother suggested. "Unless you have other plans with your team?" Dinner would be nice, I agreed, genuinely appreciating the offer. There's a place near here that I think you'd enjoy. As we walked toward the exit, my father cleared his throat. Eliza, there's something I've been wanting to say all day, but the timing never seemed right. I glanced at him, noting the unusual hesitation in his normally confident demeanor. I was wrong, he said simply. Not just about your business prospects, but about something more fundamental. I always thought success looked a certain way, followed a certain path. I tried to push you onto that path because I thought it was the only one that led to achievement and fulfillment. He paused, choosing his words carefully. But watching you today, seeing what you've built, the lives you're changing, the vision you've turned into reality, I realized I've been operating with a limited definition of success. A definition that wouldn't have created something as meaningful as what you've created. The admission, so contrary to his character as I had known it, moved me deeply. Not because I needed his approval anymore, but because it represented growth on his part, an expansion of perspective that suggested our relationship might evolve in ways I hadn't thought possible. Thank you for saying that, I replied. And for being here today. For trying to understand. As we stepped outside into the winter evening, the air crisp and clear, I found myself reflecting on the long journey from that Thanksgiving dinner, where my family had mocked my failed business, to this moment of genuine connection and mutual respect. The external markers of success, the stock price, the Microsoft partnership, even the surprising appearance on the billionaire list, had opened doors to recognition that had previously been closed. But the true victory wasn't in those metrics. It was in creating something meaningful, in staying true to a vision when easier paths presented themselves, in building technology that served human needs rather than the other way around. And perhaps most importantly, it was in the realization that validation, whether from family, investors, or the market, was never the point. The point was the work itself, the impact it created, the lives it changed for the better. As we walked toward the restaurant, my new jade pendant catching the last light of day, I felt a profound sense of alignment with my purpose, with my values, with the future still unfolding before me. The journey hadn't been about proving people wrong. It had been about proving a better way was possible. And that was a story worth telling, not for vindication or validation, but as encouragement for all the other builders out there, working in obscurity, facing dismissal and doubt, staying, true to visions others couldn't yet see. Sometimes the quiet ones aren't failing. They're just focused on building something that matters. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.